Hello guys, welcome to the first video in the series where I'm going to share with you how to transform your dog in 60 days. I'm thrilled you're here and congratulations on taking the first step to your dog's transformation. Now, I want to tell you more about the $5,000 challenge. But the main reason you're here, of course, is to find out how to transform your dog in 60 days. How long have you been thinking about it? How long have you been thinking about the behavior issues your dog has and how you'd like to change them? I can promise you, and we've now proven time and time again, that within 60 days you can have a completely transformed dog. We've helped transform dogs that needed to get over human aggression, dog aggression, house training problems, chewing and digging problems, hyperactivity issues, leash pulling, bad door manners, anxiety, and so much more. No matter where your dog fits in that category, I know I've helped plenty of dogs just like yours. Let me briefly tell you how this came about. For years I've been training dogs professionally. During that time I've been able to work with and help thousands of dogs and owners. But I found that there was a problem not only within my training, but with all dog trainers in general. I found that nearly every dog trainer, from the famous ones down to the local trainers, taught dog training concepts and principles. For example, they'd teach about leadership or motivation or how to use a treat or how to use a leash and so on. All of this is great. I'd actually built a very successful career and helped thousands of people and dogs with such a style. But the problem I found was that it then fell on the owner to put things together. For example, the typical dog owner may learn from a trainer that leadership is an important concept and that in order to be a leader one should have a certain type of attitude or walk their dog in a certain way. Or perhaps someone learns from a trainer that they should reward their dog for good behavior with a treat. Okay, these seem like simple enough concepts to understand, right? And if you're a professional trainer, you can take simple concepts and apply them across the board to all parts of the dog's life and behavior. But how do you exhibit that leadership when your dog is acting aggressively to someone ringing your doorbell? How do you reward with a treat when your dog could care less because there's a huge distraction? Training concepts and philosophy are critical. They always will be. But unless a dog owner like you has a step-by-step process for how to not only understand the concept, but then how to apply it exactly, it becomes easy to get lost in trying to solve dog training issues. And that's exactly what I've done. I've put together a system so that you know exactly what to do every day during 60 days so that you can see quick and lasting change in your dog. No guesswork. No getting caught not knowing what to do. Simply a complete blueprint, taking difficult concepts and making them easier to work through. In a moment, I'm going to teach you the first part of what I'm talking about with a three-part system for understanding exactly what you need to change in what you're doing in order to see a change in your dog's behavior. Before I do that, though, let me tell you a little bit about myself and my life with dogs and what that means to you and yours. I'm a lifelong animal lover. From a young age, I was fascinated by any reptile, bird, mammal, or amphibian. But of course, I wanted a dog. I read every dog training book in the library from front to back, waiting for the day that I could finally have my own dog. My parents weren't dog lovers, so it took 14 solid years of wearing them down until I was finally able to get a dog. From all my studying, I felt I was ready. Sure enough, I started attempting to apply what I'd learned and studied in all those dog training books. But I ran into the problem that so many do. Every dog training book was full of great ideas and tips, but there wasn't a single blueprint or step-by-step formula to get my dog trained. That didn't deter me, though. I started cold calling dog trainers in my area to see if any would hire me. After a lot of rejection, I finally got one dog trainer to agree. Well, he didn't pay me, but he did allow me to come apprentice for him and learn. I soaked up everything he could teach me during my high school years. In my early 20s, I was lucky enough to secure a job on the East Coast working for a protection dog company. We would import German Shepherds from Europe, train them for personal and home protection, and then place them with families around the world. This was no small amount of training. Dogs would range in price from $20,000 to $50,000 and sometimes more. The level of training I learned and was able to master was critical for later parts of my dog training journey. After a few years, though, it was time to move on to my own business. I came to Utah and opened up shop. Within year one, I was full to the brim with clients. My unique style of pursuing the best results for my clients entirely filled my training calendar. From that first year until now, we've been growing. We now have a training facility, several trainers, and other staff. Our dog training DVDs have gone to every state and dozens of countries. We've been voted the best dog training company in Utah nearly every year we've been in business. We've been featured by nearly every major TV network, on the radio, and in local and national print. But as I mentioned previously, I recognized a weakness in my training, even with these kinds of results. A weakness that needed to be solved. From that weakness was born the most transformational program I've seen in the last 20 years that I've been in the dog training industry. I want to teach you a piece of that program. You see, one of the most important things to understand is what you're doing wrong. And don't take that as offense, but all your dog really knows is what comes naturally to him or her. What that means is that if your dog is doing things you don't like, it's simply a case of you not having trained your dogs to do the things you do like. But how can you tell what you're doing wrong? Where can you even start? Watch in with me during week 2 of our Transform Your Dog in 60 Days challenge. In this segment, I sit down with one of our dog owners to explain what I call my troubleshooting formula to help understand what you may be doing wrong with your dog right now. Take notes as you watch this.
Well, and that's actually how we want to look at it. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the dog's going to do what the dog's going to do unless somebody else shows him something different. And so what we need to do is look and see, okay, what can I change so that my dog does something different? Now, last week we changed a bunch of stuff. We changed how you walk your dog, how you have your dog wait, how your dog's eating. We've changed we've changed a bunch. And as a result, we've seen some positive things, but we're also seeing some hiccups. And so there's really only 3 categories of areas that we need to look at. So we need to be looking at our tools, our techniques, and our consistency. So no matter where you are in the training process, if you're not where you want to be, we've either got a tool problem, a technique problem, or a consistency problem. So our first week we talked a lot about tools. And so sometimes when I'm working with a client, they'll come back and say, well, the dog's not doing this, or he's not doing this right. And my question is, all right, did you have a leash? Did you have food? Did you have a crate? And so sometimes they're just not using the tools. Sometimes they're not using the tools right. They don't have the collar fitted properly. They don't have the collar, on properly or anything like that. And so, sometimes it's just the wrong tools or tools being used wrong or whatever the case might be. And so I don't think that's the case here with the place command, but like I say, for you folks at home, that's always the first thing I ask. In the beginning stages, we want, like I mentioned last week, we always want him on a leash. Next week, we're going to start working on moving towards off-leash training, but for the first month or so, we want the dog on a leash, which again is probably one of the hardest parts of doing this whole program. We want the dog on a leash so that we've got our tool for communicating with the dog. But beyond that, like I say, someone says, hey, my dog was chewing. Well, were you gone? Yes. Was he in a crate? No. Or, my dog peed on the, and so sometimes what we've got is a tool problem. Once we look and we can rule out tools, the next thing we look at is techniques. And so with techniques, I look at 2 things. Do we have the correct techniques? And are we doing the techniques correctly? And so what I mean by this is, the techniques that I'm going to present with you or to you are techniques that work. Sometimes we need to adjust here a little bit. But sometimes people are just doing things wrong. We show them, here's how you get the dog to stop jumping, and they do something different. Or here's how you get the dog to walk properly, they do something different. So sometimes people are just using the wrong technique, so they don't have the correct technique to begin with. And the next thing is, are they doing it correctly? And this is where, sometimes it helps for you guys at home to maybe have people watch you do things, to rewatch these videos so that you can, see how the techniques are done. But really, a lot of this is just about perfecting what you do. Because if you're doing things correctly, we're going to start to see him, respond well. And the last thing that we look at is consistency. And consistency is 2 things as well. And with consistency, we look at percentages and we look at time. And so what I mean by that is, going back to jumping, for example. Let's say he jumps 10 times and we correct it with the proper technique and the proper tools 4 times. 4 out of 10 is not going to get us where we want to be.
Right.
And again, that's where I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that's where in these beginning stages, this leash stays on so that I'm in a position to be very consistent. Being 100% is obviously the goal. But if we're 80, 90, 95%, that's where we're going to start to see real change. And so sometimes if we're still dealing with an issue, it's just a percentage issue that out of 10 times that we've asked the dog to do something or asked the dog to not do something, we're only communicating the proper thing, 3, 4, or 5 times. And then lastly is time. And so if we've got the right tools, we've got the right techniques, and we're doing them properly, we need to do it for a long enough period of time. And so in these beginning stages, probably a lot of what we're dealing with, with any issues we might be having, could very well be time stuff. We just need to do them longer. He's still new in the process. And so like I said, that's what I want to look at, like with his place command. My guess is we've got to work on your technique, work on his understanding a little bit better. He's cute. Just kind of work on, the technique, because something in there is kind of screwing up his understanding of it. And in fact, that's another kind of troubleshooting thing that I often share. So like I say, I look at 2 things with troubleshooting. Number 1, what can I change? And number 2, why is he doing it wrong in the first place? And with troubleshooting that, there's always 3 reasons why our dogs aren't doing something properly. Relationship. So if our dog isn't doing something properly, we've got a focus problem, a communication problem, or a relationship problem, or 2 out of the 3, or 3 out of the 3. And so focus issues deal with, dogs that get so focused elsewhere that they pull on the leash, don't come when called, get so focused on your kids that they're jumping on them, things like that. The way that we solve focus issues is by teaching what I call spatial awareness. So with spatial awareness, last week we're working on that crazy man method and teaching him, hey, be aware of my space because it moves. Or as we walk through a door, be aware of the space that you're in because you have to wait at the door. Or when we're on the bed, be aware of your space because there's a boundary here. And so as we teach spatial awareness, we start to get focus. And so focus is going to be challenging for a 6-month-old dog. Their ability to focus is less than a 2-year-old dog, for example. And so that's where the consistency comes in. We just be consistent, for as long as we need to. But anyways, when we're dealing with focus problems where the dog is focused elsewhere and we're having a hard time reeling him in, that's where, spatial awareness exercises really help there. The second problem that we run into with dogs is communication. And so what communication really is showing and teaching and communicating concepts. And so what I mean by that is most people inadvertently communicate completely wrong with their dog. They want to teach the dog to sit, so they tell them to sit. They want to teach the dog to come, so they tell the dog to come. Because this is what we would do with each other. With your kids, you would say, you would just tell them to do things because you guys speak the same language. You guys are both speaking English. Whereas with our dogs, we're on entirely different planes of understanding and languages and all that stuff. And so like I say, oftentimes people run into communication issues where they say, he knows how to come, but he won't do it. Well, maybe he knows how to come when you're holding a treat, when you're in the front, in the backyard, and there's no distractions. But you haven't communicated it enough, you haven't communicated it sufficiently, and so oftentimes, like I said, we're going to run into communication problems. The solution for communication problems is a lot of teaching and showing. Showing the dog what we want. And again, broken record, that's why we've got him on a leash in the beginning stages, so that when I say sit, we're going to work on sit and down today. When I say sit, when I say whatever I'm saying, I've got the leash to communicate that concept, or I've got the food with me to communicate that concept, and so communication is a big thing. A lot of showing, lots of repetitions. That's how we get a dog that understands what we want. And the last thing, last problem that dogs will sometimes have is a relationship issue, to where they just don't have the respect, for the owner, for the system, for your stuff, or whatever the case might be. And so relationship issues are sometimes the reason why, dogs are disobedient, quote unquote. This one I find is probably like the least culprit, but it's the most blamed. I often hear, and you've said it with him, and you might be accurate with him because he is a dominant little turd, but oftentimes people say, oh, my dog's, he's stubborn or he's dominant or whatever, and that's why he's not doing something. But when you actually look at what's happening, they never taught him how to do it. They never taught him how to focus. And so now they're seeing the dog do something, they're blaming it on dominance. And sometimes dominance is the culprit, but like I say, oftentimes, before we even get there, we've got a focus problem or a communication problem. relationship problems, we want a healthy relationship of leader-follower. We want you to, your dog to respect you, but more importantly, you to respect your dog and understand that your dog has certain needs and wants and whatnot, and sometimes those align with what you want, sometimes they don't, but it's a lot of mutual respect. But when we have relationship issues, our solution is just really great obedience. Or part of our solution is really great obedience. Because if he heals because we ask him to, if he gets on the bed because we ask him to, if he comes because we ask him to, he's putting your will first. And the more he puts your will first, the more he looks to you as a leader. The more he looks to you as a leader, the more it makes sense to, not test the relationship. And so,
now I want to share with you one more critical element of a complete transformation before I finish today. In your next training video that you'll get in a few days, I'm going to outline just what we do during the 60 days, in addition to how to establish a baseline during week 1, even during day 1, so that the 60 days becomes tons easier. But before doing that, I want to share with you a little bit about training tools that we use. If you're a carpenter, mechanic, baker, computer programmer, or dog trainer, you're only as effective as having the right tools to do the job. One of the tools we recommend is an e-collar. Alright folks, so I wanted to show you a little bit about the e-collar because I know everyone gets nervous and they say, oh, a shock collar, that's so painful, that's so mean. The reality is, you can't even call this a shock collar anymore. With how the technology has advanced over the years and the levels that we use it on such low levels, this actually becomes a very humane way to train the dog. And so, in fact, whenever we have clients in person, we always have them feel the collar before we ever use it. And so I'm on level 12. I don't know if you can see that in the camera there. This thing goes up to 100, so I'm sure it can get kind of painful. I'm sure it could, but we don't go up that high. We tend to use levels that are, 12 is about an average. So that's what I always have people feel. Sometimes we're a little bit higher, sometimes we're a little bit lower, and you could hit this all day and barely feel a little tickle. From your dog, that's all we're looking for. It's just this slight little tickle. And so some people say, well, how does that work then if all they're feeling is just this tiny little tickle? Well, it's simple, it's just not easy. As you get into the program and you see how it works, you start to see, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that makes a lot of sense. So, for example, when we've got dogs that don't come when called, we'll get a nice long leash, 20 feet. We'll kind of hold on the button, and pull on that leash. When they start to come, we'll release the button. And at first the dog's like, that's a weird little tickle. Oh, someone's pulling me, I'll go that way, and it releases. Weird little tickle, they go that way, it releases. As time goes on, they start to realize, oh, okay, every time I feel that little tickle, I just come back and everything's fine. And so we didn't have to use like this painful zap to get the dog to come when called, which is what a lot of people picture with this style of training. We didn't have to use any sort of pain or any big punishment. We use this as a teaching tool rather than a punishment tool. And when it's used as a teaching tool, it's incredibly humane. We can use very low levels, and it's there to kind of communicate concepts with the dog, teach them concepts, and it's actually so much easier on the dog than traditional methods. And actually, when done right, it's even far more humane than just pure treat training. And so it's a very humane way to train. Now, not everyone that gets our program is going to use this. Not everyone in the Transform Your Dog in 60-Day Challenge is going to use this. The advantage this gives is it makes it easier on you, makes it easier on the dog, and it makes our training go a lot faster. And so, like I say, making it easier on you and the dog, that's what I'm looking for. We're trying to get this big old transformation in a short period of time. The e-collar is one of the fastest ways to do that. But again, if you're not convinced yet, get started with the program here, and then perhaps later you start using the e-collar to touch things up and make things better, or perhaps you don't and you get to your final goal without it. But either way you shave it, when you go online and you read all the horror stories, some of them might be true, but they're true of this collar used inappropriately. When it's used appropriately, it's awesome. So don't be afraid of this. When it's done right, when it's done the way that we're going to show you in our program, this is a great way to get your dog trained. Now, I know at this stage, some people are going to be saying, but my dog is different. Will this work for my dog? Let me tell you this. Every dog is different. Every breed is different. But the foundation for solving every dog problem with every gender, breed, and age of dog is establishing the correct relationship and what I call the correct dog baseline. If you establish this baseline right, your training is going to be a cinch. Your next training video is going to outline this baseline. It's going to teach you exactly what to do to identify this baseline and create it with your dog, along with outlining your 60-day plan. Again, get this right and aggression, behavior problems, anxiety, house training, destruction, and more can literally melt away. Thanks for watching today. If you've learned something in this video or have been reminded of a principle that is important, I would ask you to please like, comment, and share this content. I look forward to talking with you here in a few days and showing you your next video.